Have you ever decided, man, I want a storm chase on a severely painful migraine with a little bit of bouts of nausea and your car looking like a hoarder house with all the Gatorade bottles stashed in the front? No. Well, I did. And you know what? A little part of me doesn't feel bad. Because it was the best structure day in Virginia in a long time. And that says a lot. Buckle up, buckaroos, and check out some of my best Mid-Atlantic slop of all time. On May 15th, 2025, a northwest flow regime would begin to set itself up across the Mid-Atlantic region. This came after days of historic flooding in the Shenandoah Valley and across into the Allegheny Front as rivers began to overflow with unprecedented rain amounts. Most of this severe weather setup would occur across the similar regions, and especially centered across the Shenandoah Valley and into the Charlottesville region. I began to leave my house around 1 p.m. this day as Supercells began to attempt to initiate anyways off of the Shenandoah Mountains and into the valley. An alarming sign earlier in the day is when all these updrafts would pop up in the valley would begin to rotate across the region even well before they were seen on radar. This would give an idea for what would occur later in the region as more rigorous convection would explode in West Virginia and move into the valley and eventually into Charlottesville as full-blown supercells later on in the day. After hours waiting, finally it paid off, and 2 supercells entered the Harrisonburg region in the Shenandoah Valley, and they began to rapidly intensify as they approached the Shenandoah National Park. As both of these supercells moved towards my position, I noticed the only base that I could actually see was the furthest back supercell down by Harrisonburg, where the one that just moved through Harrisonburg was blocked by a mountain and I could not see it. So for a little bit, I decided that I would take pictures of this particular supercell, including its base, and waited for the other supercell to show itself, which looked way more dominant on radar. As the northern supercell moved into Oakton, Virginia, I noticed that there was a wall cloud starting to set itself up right as it crossed the mountain. So I decided my next best option was to return to my original location, where I would continue taking photos of this supercell as it moved down into the valley. For some reason, the southern supercell was on the struggle bus and became a more flatter base, while the northern supercell set up a more structured base. I would expect the northern supercell would likely be the tornadic one, especially if it got nudged by the southern supercell. Around this time, a family set up a cross at the same church in their RV that were just traveling through Virginia. They decided to strike up a conversation as the storm continued down into the valley. It's always the people that you meet on these chases that are the most interesting. The people who come up to you and ask you what you're doing, or if you're a storm chaser, and the conversations always go into an interesting direction. Because people are fascinated both by the idea and scared of storms, and I can't really blame them. Storms are really destructive, they can be intimidating. However, it's really funny how they decided to all watch this while there was lightning raining down on our heads as the northern supercell began to intensify and wrap up and tried to produce a tornado multiple times in front of me. Before I left, I took photos of the life cycle of the supercell at this current point, in which it routinely tried to establish a low-level circulation that was tight in the center of the base. Although it never could establish this, it would establish it later on down by the Shenandoah National Park. As the supercell began to interact with the Shenandoah Mountains, I began to wonder if I really just saw a tornado, as a lot scud would get pulled up into the mesocyclone and form what looked like, from my position, vortices. However, the camera didn't really capture it well. However, if a tornado occurred in this region, it's heavily unlikely that anything would ever be confirmed, as north of Swift Run, there's nothing but national forests and trails. All of it's inaccessible, and any tornado that would have occurred here would have been been way too weak to create any type of scar that would have been on the terrain. Even if there wasn't any tornado, it still allowed for quick photos in this region, as I had a clear shot of the intensifying rotation, as well as the entire wall cloud consolidating over these homes in swift run. As I tried to catch up to the cell, I tried to drive through the national forest. Thankfully, the cell's motions was only about 20 to 30 miles per hour, so catching up and getting back in front of it was not a hard thing to do. Unless if I had, a really slow driver in my way who's probably not from the area. However, I would eventually catch up to the supercell later on down near Charlottesville, and I would quickly start moving to the southeast, trying to reorientate myself in a way where I could catch structure in a better position. As I set up one last time near Williams Fork, I managed to catch a couple photos of this supercell before I decided to hop on the southern supercell, which was now turning on near Charlottesville. As I approached from the north, I had to core punch through all the rain in the forward flank. Unknown to me, this storm was actually producing some large hail at the time, which I didn't encounter till later in the chase when I started approaching the base and the rain cleared out, and all of a sudden I started getting hit by what was initially nickel-sized hail, although it quickly turned a quarter to an inch into 2.5. However, after enduring a lot of the hail, I got through the hail core, and I noticed that this supercell had now transitioned to a full-on mothership, which is incredibly rare in Virginia. However, structure like this is incredible to see with your eyes. As I approached Free Union and Whitehall, I sat for a second at certain locations taking photos of the supercell as it transitioned across the landscape. Unlucky for me, around this time, I actually ended up blowing out a lot of my highlights in these photos, to the point where they're barely repairable. However, it was still a decent capture of the supercell that did occur here. As the supercell moved to the southeast, I tried to drop south to get back on it and capture some more structure, although I would never be able to get into the inflow notch again like I did that one time. I eventually came across an area north across it that allowed me for one last photographing opportunity before I would have to call the chase because we were approaching 8:20 p.m. As I began to head home, I felt accomplished in what I have done that day. However, I did get more sick that night, as clearly storm chasing with a migraine was not the best option. But hey, it worked, and I caught the best supercell event that Virginia likely will have this year. But was it worth it? Probably not, but I still got it. Anyways, with that being said, thank you for watching, and have a good day. Is that all?